Hi, Miss Farah and everyone. We are from Group 8. We would like to present our standalone literature review titled Psychological and Behavioral Impacts of Violent Digital Games Among Malaysian Students. Violent digital games are widely accessible among Malaysian students, including secondary, pre-university, and university populations. With increased accessibility, concerns have emerged regarding their influence on behavior, emotions, and social functioning. Malaysian empirical studies have reported recurring psychological and behavioral effects, particularly aggression and emotional difficulties. However, these findings are spread across individual studies and have not always been examined together. Therefore, this review addresses the research question: what are the psychological and behavioral impacts of violent digital games among students in Malaysia? The purpose of this review is to synthesize Malaysian empirical studies to identify recurring psychological and behavioral patterns, and to highlight research gaps and methodological limitations within the existing literature. That's all from me. Now I pass to my next member.
My name is Uttarasini. Now I will continue with my part. This study adopted a stand-alone literature review designed using thematic synthesis guided by a predefined review protocol. All articles were identified using Google Scholar only. A total of 10 empirical Malaysian studies published between 2014 and 2025 were included. The inclusion criteria were peer-reviewed studies conducted in Malaysia focusing on violent digital or video game exposure, involving secondary, pre-university or university students and reporting psychological or behavior outcomes. The exclusion criteria included non-Malaysian samples, non-violent or general gaming studies, non-student population and 10 non-empirical papers such as opinion articles. Based on these criteria, eligible studies were organized into a synthesis matrix which allowed findings to be compared across studies and grouped into recurring teams. However, several limitations were identified across the review studies. Most relied on self-reported questionnaires which may introduce response bias. In addition, the predominance of cross-sectional design limits casual interpretations. There is also limited longitudinal evidence and protective or contextual factors remain unexplored. So that's all from me. Now I will pass to next presenter.
Hi, my name is Shiting. The thematic synthesis identified four main themes across the review studies. Theme 1 focuses on aggressions-related behavior. The finding shows that exposure to violent digital games is commonly linked to increased aggressions, including anger, hostility, and aggressive tendency. Verbal aggressions was frequently reported, suggesting that violent game content may influence how students respond to frustrations and conflict. Overall, aggressions appears as a consistent behavioral outcome rather than an isolated finding. Beside that is theme 2, which is examines emotional and psychological disturbance. Several studies reported emotional deregulations and reduced empathy among students exposed to violent digital content. Repeated exposure may reduce emotional sensitivity and make students less aware of the impact of their actions on others. This raises concern about peer relationships and student safety as emotional difficulties can affect social interactions. Next, theme 3, related to exposure intensity and durations. The findings indicate that higher frequency of exposure is associated with stronger negative outcomes. In addition, longer play duration is linked to cumulative effects, meaning the impact may increase over time. This pattern suggests that the amount and duration of exposure matter, not just whether students play violent games.
I'm Chandrabhairavi Kalithasan. Theme 4 focuses on individual and psychosocial moderators. The findings show that the effects of violent digital games are not the same for all students. Instead, outcomes vary depending on individual characteristics and psychosocial context. Some students may show stronger aggressive or emotional responses, while others are less affected. This suggests that violent digital game exposure operates within a context-dependent framework rather than producing uniform effects. To demonstrate themes were identified, the poster includes a synthesis matrix, except and a connection table. The synthesis matrix shows how findings were systematically organized by research purpose, methods, key findings, themes, and limitation. The connection table visually summarizes how multiple studies align with the main themes, highlighting consistent patterns across the literature. In conclusion, this literature review shows that violent digital game exposure is associated with behavioral and emotional risk among Malaysian students. Aggression and emotional dysregulation are the most consistent outcomes. Higher exposure intensity tends to intensify negative effects, while individual differences influence how strongly students are affected. Future research should prioritize longitudinal and context-sensitive designs to better understand these impacts. Thank you. That's all from us.